Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel, and I will be moderating today's webinar, You May Not Know It, but Your CRM is Begging for This, hosted by 3CLogic and Epicom. First, I'd like to introduce our two guest speakers. Representing 3CLogic, we have Guillaume Sainhave, VP of Sales and Marketing with over 10 years of experience in sales and customer service. In his role, he routinely shares best practices regarding how to marry technology and business processes to enhance the overall customer experience. And representing Epicom, we have Amanda Anderson, Director of Marketing. Amanda has extensive experience in advertising, graphic design, product management, demand generation, and marketing strategy. Welcome, Guillaume and Amanda. We're excited to have you both here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. And during this webinar, Guillaume and Amanda are going to help us explore some of the benefits CRM platforms provide, but where they're falling short in delivering on customer needs and expectations, the negative impacts of utilizing disparate CRM and telephony platforms within the contact center, and then the value businesses will obtain by integrating their CRM with a contact center solution, including increased sales, enhanced customer service, increased first call resolutions, and improved agent satisfaction. So at this point, I'm going to give the floor to Amanda.
Thanks so much, Rachel. So to kick things off today, some of the things that we're going to talk about is where CRM is lacking, but to sort of set the stage, I think it's more appropriate to talk about what a CRM does well. At Epicom, we've deployed hundreds of CRM systems, but some of the common misperceptions of a CRM is that it's just meant for sales. While that is true that it is a great sales tool, it's great for tracking opportunities, it's great for tracking leads, but it's not necessarily just a sales tool. CRM, as we see it, is the anchor of a business. It's the hub of that customer journey information. So while a CRM isn't necessarily meant to do it all, it's not meant to do your marketing, it's not meant to be your support system, it's not meant to be your finance system, but it is meant to be the hub of that critical information in terms of customer activity. So what we advise customers is to find the best application for that particular department and then pull the information that's pertaining to the customer back into the CRM system. And that's what the CRM is so great at. So it's great at being a sales tool, but it's also great at being the hub and center of that customer journey. And that's a common mistake and misunderstanding that companies will make about a CRM system. But what's important about that is that it all depends on integrating the outside applications into your CRM system. That's where the power comes into place. So to kind of draw a little bit of attention to that value of the CRM system, I wanted to bring to light some stats here. So $5.60 is the average return on every dollar spent on CRM. So where does that number come from? How do we generate that ROI with our CRM system? Well, one of the places is with opportunity tracking. So by putting all of your opportunity and sales data into the CRM, you're able to be accountable for that information. So nothing slips through the cracks. So it's no longer in a spreadsheet, no longer gets lost in a sales rep's head or cell phone. You're able to then track all of that information much more tightly so that you don't lose out on opportunities or deals. Another is efficiency gains. So by automating manual tasks, you're able to save a lot of time and put that time to selling more. So another value of a CRM system is that 74% of CRM users say that CRM system offers improved access to customer data. So kind of one place that, it's one place that you can see everything. It goes back to that transparency factor. So you can see past emails, call notes, product purchase. It all goes back to more information is very, very valuable with the CRM system. And lastly, there's 20 to 40% increase in customer spending for companies using a CRM system. So overall, there's more upsell opportunity by having more information in your CRM system. For example, if a customer keeps calling about their internet being slow and they constantly have support tickets, well, if a sales rep can see that information, that sales rep can sell them a high-speed internet package. They can upsell that account. But it's not all dependent on the CRM. The CRM is only as powerful as the data it has inside of it. So it relies on other applications to feed into the CRM. So how is that sales rep supposed to know that their customer is calling about a support issue that they're having with their system if they can't see that and see into those other applications? So removing the data silos is huge. So, G, I know that this goes into some other components that is really critical that we want to talk about today. And it's all about the customer experience. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Amanda, and thanks for setting the stage. I mean, I totally agree that there's certainly a very key role that CRMs play, and I do think that the use cases that people tend to apply CRMs to tend to be limited to sales, and that can unfortunately be to the disadvantage of the company that's otherwise already paying for that solution and that platform. But regardless of what capacity you're using the CRM, when it comes to customer experience, ultimately CRMs are meant to help manage, aggregate data, specifically around the consumer. And ultimately, what you're hoping to achieve as a business is to utilize that information at the most crucial point. And that's where CRMs tend to sort of fall a little short. And what they don't inherently provide at the end of the day is the human touch point. So ultimately, what you're trying to achieve with a CRM is to have readily available information that an agent can use, whether they're initiating an outbound sales opportunity or call, pursuing a lead, or maybe they're on the receiving end of incoming support inquiry from a customer. Ultimately, the management of that medium, those mediums, whether it's phone or chat or so on and so forth, are not inherently provided with a CRM. So when those interactions take place, if the information is perfectly housed in the CRM, but it's not readily made available to the agent at the edge of their fingertips when those interactions are initiated, again, whether it's the business initiating it or the consumer, then you actually have a gap in that customer experience or the potential for one. And so even under the best circumstances, if you're utilizing the CRM the way it's intended to, if a consumer were to call you and the agent is unavailable or unable to answer your questions because that information is not displayed automatically with that incoming call or with that outgoing sales opportunity, then that leads into those use cases that we're all familiar with, where you might be reaching out to a business and they transfer you from one agent to the next and next, ultimately each one telling you that they're the wrong individual, or quite frankly, it could be a sales agent calling you and really, noticeably unfamiliar with why they're reaching out to you, or really having no opportunity to really make that connection to really facilitate that conversation and maybe, have that opportunity for a sale. And it's not an unknown fact that this is a lacking or gap within the CRM ecosystem. It's not something that CRMs claim to do, and yet it's something that some individuals assume is provided. And you can actually see that within quotes from individuals that actually advocate very strongly in the CRM ecosystem. I think, Amanda, you've got an example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a quote from Larry Augustine, the CEO of Sugar CRM. So I'll read the first part of this quote. The key to customer satisfaction is the key to customer satisfaction in the future is retaining the human interaction, combining that with digital interaction, and delivering a personalized experience to each individual. So I think that's really key to what we're talking about today. I mean, Sugar CRM's product division as a whole is to provide extraordinary customer relationships. So when they're developing the actual CRM product, they have in mind the customer journey mapping. And that all goes back to sort of this whole concept of that entire 360-degree view of the customer is super, super critical, and not to discount the human interaction. I mean, that is very, very key to providing that great, excellent experience. So it's, going back to the human interactions are only as good as the data behind it, in the sense that if those human interactions are happening, you have to have that data to back up that great experience. And then to flip it around, once that human interaction happens, what happened in that conversation needs to go back into the CRM. So it's a complete 360 view of, it's just a recurring cycle of the conversations can happen successfully, only because of the data, and then after those conversations happen, it needs to fulfill the CRM system again.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, and I think it's an excellent quote, especially coming from someone that actually advocates on behalf of CRMs, to actually recognize the fact that there's a difference between the digital interaction and actually the personalization of one. So if the CRM is maintaining all that digital data, then presumably there still necessitates the need for a medium that can help bring that digital information to the forefront so that you can, in fact, provide that personalized relationship to the end consumer between business and end user. And, the unfortunate thing, or perhaps the challenge in all that is we now live in a very multi-channel world. So it's not just telephony, though we tend to gravitate towards telephony when we use these use cases or come up with these use cases. But the fact is, and it should come as no surprise, that we live in a very multi-channel world where now email, text, chat, social media, and video are additional mediums that are now being used by the consumer to either interact or receive interactions from a business. And so the challenge here is, if the CRM is sort of the core network that's aggregating all that information, the information is coming from different mediums. And yet, while a consumer may use a multitude of these medium channels, whether it's perhaps a combination of email, voice, and chat to communicate with a single business, it's up to the business to be able to unify those different interactions into a single database, notably a CRM, and then be able to aggregate it all and actually analyze what were the different communications, piece them together, connect the dots so that you can actually maintain a unified experience between yourself and the consumer. But at the end of the day, voice is still a very crucial component. Despite the fact that we do live in a multi-channel environment, despite the fact that social media and so on and so forth are gaining traction, it may be cannibalizing a little bit of the voice ecosystem to some degree. The reality is that voice is actually not a dead avenue. In fact, I would argue it's increasingly more important. If it was the de facto point of interaction between consumer and business in the past, that hasn't fundamentally changed, although the circumstances under which an individual will gravitate or use voice or telephony to communicate with a company or business or organization, those circumstances to some extent have changed. And it's largely tied to when they want to initiate a conversation. And most of the time it has to do with when, or the level of criticality of the issue itself. So here what you have in front of you is a report by Forrester that very strongly highlights that even since 2012, going into 2014, and I think recent data coming out in 2016 will prove out to be the same, that conversations with customer service representatives or agents via the telephone still account for 3/4 of the majority of the interactions that occur between one individual and the next. Now, obviously, other mediums have notably taken up some ground, SMS, social media, email, and so on and so forth, but there's still a high preference for that human touch point, which is really what we're talking about today. And if we move on to the next slide, what you'll see is that if in the past telephony was critical for any and all inquiries, what's really noticeably changed is for simple inquiries, which is really the graph you have here on the left. And again, this was provided by a global service barometer from American Express. You'll see that for simple inquiries, individuals tend to use alternative channels other than telephony. They want to use channels where they can self-service or it's more convenient, whether it's email, chat, maybe social media to vent their issues, whatever the case may be. But as the issue becomes increasingly more and more complex, they're going to want that human touch point. They're going to want to be able to interact with a live individual, which really highlights the importance of that individual having access to the relevant information when that interaction is required. Because when a consumer is reaching out to your business, most often than not, it's because they're having an issue that they cannot resolve through the other channels that everyone is so familiar with today that we've already highlighted. They cannot resolve it across the medium, so they want to be able to speak to a live individual. And that really is either an opportunity for an organization to differentiate themselves within their industry, or quite frankly, to put themselves at risk if they're not able to provide their agent the relevant information so that they can in fact provide a successful interaction. And as much as I'm focusing on customer service in this case, where the call is being initiated by the consumer, it applies the other way around as well. If you cannot reach your consumer base using a medium that makes sense, that's relevant, timely, with information that the consumer will readily accept, then your odds of being successful in a sales organization are equally as poor as they would be in a service situation if you don't unify, for example, a data management system like a CRM with the actual telephony mediums to combine or connect those dots. And I think, Amanda, you've got examples of some brands that really do a very good job of this, brands that we're familiar with, and yet we take for granted why and how they're successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So here on the screen you can see that there's, a couple of very well-known brands, Zappos, Amazon, Starbucks, Nordstrom, Apple, and what's important about these is not that they're just great brands, but all of these companies provide excellent customer service. And that's the core of their business. That's their differentiator to some degree. And what is it about them that they're able to provide excellent customer service? Well, they have the tools to support that. They have the platform and the data to give every single one of their reps and customer service agents the tools and the data to have great, meaningful conversations so that no one calls Zappos and gets a rep on the phone that doesn't know what their last order was or isn't willing to help them or doesn't know their previous history. They have all the information they need to have a successful phone conversation. So what is it about them that is so important? I mean, the reps are not necessarily smarter or better employees. It all is fundamentally about the tools to support that success and have a great service department. And really, customer service is actually becoming more important than price and product. So as companies try and differentiate their brands over and over, I mean, it's no longer going to be about discounting your prices or having a better product. It's about the customer experience that customer gets whenever they call your company. And not only is it about keeping your customers happy, but it's also representing your brand. If you get an agent on the phone talking directly to your customer that isn't knowledgeable, then that affects and hurts the brand. It doesn't just hurt that relationship with the customer, but with the power of social media and all the tools out there, it will get out that you do not have a great service department, and that will reflect negatively on your company. So we're seeing more and more that it's becoming hugely important to have a great service department. So how do you become a Zappos? Well, the key is to ensure to ensure communication channels and customer information are not siloed. So this goes back to the point of transparency. It's an integration into your CRM system. So if you're using external tools for customer support, marketing, finance, you're tying any customer interaction and activity back into the CRM. If you're starting to build data silos through having separate applications that don't speak to each other, then you're going to lose that critical information that you need to have successful customer conversations. But the issue is that less than 10% of interactions are entered into the CRM system. So if it's not automated and happening automatically, it's really, really hard to get your employees to manually enter this data in, and that's why you see this very, very low number of interactions being entered into the CRM system. So it becomes really critical that there is an automated way to make this happen. This is a perfect segue into talking about the agent desktop and merging that with the CRM center.
Yeah, Amanda, I mean, you make an excellent point. I think that the last data point that you highlighted is really quite crucial. I mean, ultimately, what you're trying to achieve as a business is the ability to really automate your agent's daily life, not just to enhance the customer experience, but also to enhance their ability to be successful, which, believe it or not, does play a role in employee retention and CSAT scores and things of that nature. But ultimately, yes, I mean, you alluded earlier in the discussion that at the end of the day, your CRM is only as good as the information that's inputted into it. And so to be able to make use of good data, the assumption is that on a regular basis, new and updated information is being added to the CRM. But if only less than 90 or only 10% of interactions as they occur are actually finding themselves back in the CRM, you don't have that benefit of hindsight and history to be able to use for the sake of continuing that relationship and perhaps growing it. So at the end of the day, you want to be able to automate the customer experience by really combining the communication platforms. So as you can see here in front of you, you can actually facilitate the communication between the consumer and the business, whether it's on the customer service and support side, as you see here at the top, or whether it's related to outgoing sales and marketing initiatives where you're trying to reach the customer for the first time and want to do so in a relevant manner. And a platform like a Sugar CRM is going to help aggregate that information and then facilitate the communication platform to use it at the most optimal time, whether it's on the receiving end of an inquiry from the consumer, where you're going to auto-populate, for example, that information of the incoming call so that the agent is displayed with the relevant data that they need to be successful, or whether it's on the outgoing end. New leads are coming in, you want to route them to the appropriate agent at the right time. If you're on the East Coast, you don't want to accidentally call California at 6 o'clock in the morning, as an example. That's certainly not going to improve your odds of success. And then using the expertise from both Sugar, 3CLogic, but most notably a consulting firm like Epicom that can really help mend the two together, so you do end up having a complete seamless platform. One that's going to help facilitate the success rate of your agents because you're automating their day while giving you, from a supervisor standpoint, the ability to monitor and manage their activities so that you're constantly optimizing your organization, ultimately to help develop and retain those customers, mainly by relationship, because as Amanda alluded to earlier, it's really the customer experience that's superseding price and product today in terms of the biggest competitive differentiator in today's market, regardless of the industry. So those are your end goals. And what we have here is we have a couple of things that we can show here for the sake of demonstration, some basic use cases, just to sort of provide some background in terms of how you would achieve that. So let me just switch screens here. So for the purposes of example here, what we have is a demonstration of a 3CLogic our cloud call center application integrated with Sugar CRM. So what you have here is what would be displayed to an end user, to an agent, and what they have is all of the telephony requirements they might need across different channels: email, chat, inbound calls, as well as outbound calls, access to the members of their call center so they can chat with them. But most importantly, they also have the integrated use of Sugar CRM. So they can actively use the CRM as they would as a standalone solution, but within a single interface integrated between both applications. So, for the sake of use cases, what I'll do here as an agent, I'm going to go ahead and make myself available. When I do so, I'm actually, for the purposes of this use case, I'm actually part of a sales team, and the system is going to automatically start to make outbound calls for me. So what you have here is the system is going to boot up, and it's going to start dialing calls on my behalf, calls that have already been selected for me to call. So this is where the automation comes between the CRM and the telephony solution, and this is where my day as an agent is automated. So for example, instead of having to rely on the agent to remember to call back a lead, just for use, data point, it takes 8 calls to actually reach a new lead on average. If you don't automate that, it's most likely that after a couple of calls, an agent will either forgive or forget to continue to pursue that opportunity, which is obviously lost opportunities for the organization. In this case, leads are automatically populated to me as an agent, in which case what I have here is the ability to access any and all information relevant to this individual. I have access to all prior calls that may have taken place, what was the status of those calls, who initiated those calls. I can read the notes that may have taken place within the interaction, and I can really have an educated, goal-oriented discussion with this opportunity, whether it's a follow-up or perhaps the first time I'm reaching out to that individual. And as a separate use case, what I can show here from a supervisor standpoint is the ability to actually intelligently route incoming calls. So here what you have is the 3CLogic solution, basically a drop-down menu that helps allow you to create a decision tree that would help basically dictate for an incoming inquiry. In this case, let's pretend it's someone calling your 1-800 support hotline. Where and under what circumstances would you route that call to one individual, one department, and under what circumstances? So you can see here, if someone were to call in, they might be prompted with press 1 if you have an incident number, press 2 if you're an existing customer, or press 3 if you're a new customer. And depending on that information, it's going to route it down the decision tree, ultimately looking to figure out who is the final individual individual to whom we should route this call. Who is the one most qualified to answer? In this use case, you can see if someone enters their incident number, one thing that we do here that's very cool is that we actually have the ability to then tap back into, for example, Sugar CRM and request from Sugar based on the inputs from this customer. In this case, they entered a specific incident number. It could be 12345. Is it a high priority? Is it a low priority? Is this a platinum customer? Have they called within the last 24 hours? We can pull all that information from perhaps the advanced workflows within Sugar and allow Sugar to then come back to 3CLogic and notify us based on these inputs, here are the most qualified agents, or here are the projects to whom you should send this individual. And then the 3CLogic, the communication platform, can then determine, okay, well then of those individuals, who's actually available to receive that call, send that call over, and then as I showed, when a call initiates, automatically have, in this case, the Sugar CRM data information on that individual populate and be readily available to the agent so that when they receive that call, they actually know whom they're speaking to, what their background has been, and really can quickly dive into what their inquiry might be, ultimately with the goal of resolving it and really enhancing that customer experience. Amanda, anything to add there?
No, I think this is really great. I mean, can you imagine having your sales reps actually make the calls they need to make because it's automated? I mean, that's life-changing for a CRM system. So, I mean, the fact that they can go through this automated list and actually, you guys have even done this for customers is to actually automatically create that call record, and you can, record the conversations, and that can go back into the CRM. So the fact that all of that data is there is really, really huge to use from a sales standpoint and even, support standpoint. To have that in the CRM makes it really, really powerful and useful. So, a lot of companies that will say, oh, my CRM system isn't working for me, or it doesn't, it's failing, it's not useful. It's oftentimes because they don't have the data in there, and this solves that problem.
Correct. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it tends to be a lack of operational processes to utilize really the best of both worlds. So, in this case, bringing the two together really allows to, and in this example, you really get to see sort of the symbiotic relationship. The success of the interaction, again, regardless of the medium, but in this case, we'll use telephony as the example. The success of that interaction is contingent on there being relevant information populated to the agent, again, whether it's a sales call or support call, at the most important time, which is at the point of the interaction. But of course, the success of that call is also contingent that the data in the CRM is not only current but available. But then future interactions that may take place are also going to be contingent on each interaction being recorded, so that when you do have that follow-up discussion with that agent or with that consumer, that you have the most up-to-date information. That goes back to your earlier data point, which is that, perhaps 10% or maybe less than 10% of any interaction or data is actually input into the CRM. Well, for an interaction to be successful, it's contingent on the CRM having updated information. And for the CRM to be updated, it's contingent on the interaction being documented when it takes place for future use. So you get sort of this rotational feedback where over the course of time, you're going to be able to aggregate not only more information that's going to help facilitate those interactions, but we can actually automate it so that it's not left to human error, and at the same time facilitate the agent's day on a regular basis so that they can actually focus on what's most important, which is the interactions themselves. They're not trying to chase them if it's in a sales capacity, and they're not aimlessly looking for information at the expense of a customer's patience on incoming support inquiry. So, the two together really help support each other over the course of time. Obviously they can be standalone applications, but when you bring them together, you really actually help both of them make up for any faults or gaps that they might have within their own individual service offerings, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing this with us. This is really great what 3CLogic is doing. It's game-changing for CRM and contact centers.
Sure, absolutely. No, so that was my pleasure, Amanda, and hopefully this was helpful for everyone that found time out of their day to listen in. But most likely, I mean, we only really grazed the surface in terms of what a CRM, and telephony or call center integrated combined solution could in fact provide. I think the use cases are really quite limitless. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions out there, and I'd love to make both ourselves and Epicom available to address them. So a little bit of background on 3CLogic. We specifically focus on call center software. Now, call centers, everyone thinks sort of old school, floors and floors of cubicles, but the reality is now there's been sort of a fundamental shift where call centers really apply to any and all interactions between business and consumer. And we cover the gamut. You can see sort of the host of solutions that we have. But one of our real strong suits is the fact that we really enjoy integrating and partnering with consulting firms like Epicom that focus on how to extrapolate the most out of a CRM and see the value in extending the benefits of a CRM by integrating it with a solution like our own, where you can in fact sort of get that 360-degree loop that enhances not only the customer experience but the opportunity for success on the agent side. So if anybody has any questions, we certainly encourage them to reach out to us.
Thanks so much, G. And just to speak a little bit about Epicom, so we are a CRM and marketing automation technology solution company, and what I mean by that is, we focus on deploying CRM systems for companies. So we take the company through a consulting process, identify their needs, how to make it successful, whether that be customizations, integrations, and takes the customer all the way through deploying the CRM system and managing it after the fact. So we work with a lot of companies, third-party companies and vendors that are best suited to integrate and tie into the CRM system. And 3CLogic is a great partner of ours. And whenever we identify a need that the CRM cannot fulfill or is not really in question to customize a solution in the CRM for a company, we often seek out third-party software providers and integrate that into the CRM system. Kind of what I was saying before is that the CRM is not supposed to do it all. It would be kind of crazy to think that it could do everything. So we advise companies to seek out other partners, and then we tie them into the CRM system so that overall it is a great solution for the company. So that is often what our firm focuses on, and it's great to have partners like 3CLogic where we can go to where the CRM is not, acting so great in a call center, contact center solution, and we can lean on them to provide that solution for our customers.
Thank you so much, Guillaume and Amanda, for your time. We hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. And if you'd like to learn more about 3CLogic or Epicom, please visit their website or contact them directly using the provided information. Thanks again.